cousin.
Yeah,
because these two are mine.
That's the thing. I always feel like I always come up short with like topics and everything like that sometimes, but
We'll think of something.
I'll figure something out.
We'll talk about Death Note.
Well, I'll plan something.
Cool.
Ahead of time for that, but that's then. This is now, and we're talking about a historical man with deformities.
Yep.
So, welcome, guys, to the General Geekery Podcast, the podcast where we like to talk about everything that we like to talk about and geek over. Today is going to be a little bit of a theater kind of episode, but more on that in just a moment. As always, your coffee ninja by day, voice actor, and streamer by night, Donald Kaczynski. And with me, as always, the artistic master herself, Hannah Kubiak.
Hello.
Yep.
I had a little coffee burp there.
It's okay.
Clink, clink.
Clink, clink to that. Oh my god, that should be like a slogan. That should be like a slogan merchandise thing. Clink, clink.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it should be. Clink, clink.
One of these days. But, so yeah, Hannah, how you doing?
Pretty good. We go into tech in 2 weeks for, the next show that VFR is doing called The Elephant Man.
And we've talked about Voice of Sound Repertory several times on the podcast before. We gave them a shout out for their production of Henry V a couple of months back. Wonderful production. Lovely theater company in the Milwaukee area that both me and Hannah have worked with.
Yep.
And, Hannah, for this show, for The Elephant Man, you were the assistant director for that as well.
That's right.
You?
Yeah. So, I'm the assistant director. It's directed by Brandon Hout, who he's worked with VFR before as well. In fact, back in the day, he was the Hamlet to my Ophelia in my first ever show with VFR.
Oh, yeah! So, that's right!
Yeah, and so he asked me to assistant direct because I've directed before and everything, and I love this play.
It's a great story.
Yeah, it is. It's a great play about just sort of humanity.
I am not an animal.
You know, I actually just was watching a couple of those clips. So good.
Yeah, from the movie version, right?
Yeah, from the movie from 1980. And yeah, John Hurt and Anthony Hopkins.
Brilliant.
Anthony Hopkins. He's great.
He really is.
I want to mention Silence of the Lambs again.
Yeah, last episode.
The fact that he can play Hannibal Lecter and C.S. Lewis in Shadowlands and do both equally well is just amazing to me.
And also be the god of Asgard in the Thor movies.
Yeah, he's Odin, and in Julie Taymor's Titus, he was Titus.
Brilliant.
I don't know what it is.
He's got
a like cannibalistic streak going there.
He's got an aura about him that is just almost otherworldly at times.
Yeah. Oh, he's an amazing guy.
But, okay, so The Elephant Man, what we're talking about, for those that are not familiar with this particular person, it is a English gentleman by the name of Joseph Merrick.
Joseph Merrick.
Who, in the 1800s he became a freak show attraction because he had peculiar deformities in his body, which earned him the title The Elephant Man.
Yeah.
And his story has been told in several different medias. I think it was in 1979, the play was originally produced.
I was just trying to look that up just now.
It says right here.
1979?
1979 play by Bernard Pomerantz.
Yeah. Oh, they jumped on making that movie then.
Yeah, because the movie was released like the year afterward.
Wow, yeah. And so that's pretty it's pretty interesting because the way that they filmed the movie, they had basically prosthetics and makeup and all this stuff that they put on John Hurt.
Yeah.
And to give him like what they had what is it called? The osseous growths, which is like bone.
Mm-hmm.
His skull, if you look at sort of like, there's some pictures in this book here that I highly recommend you read if you're interested in the Elephant Man. It's called The True History of the Elephant Man. It's got pictures in here. It's got, like, these are the pictures they took of him when they took him into the hospital and
man.
And
his skeleton is like on display at like it's at like the which British hospital?
It's at the London Hospital.
London Hospital.
The one
That's
that he lived at. Yeah.
There it is. Okay.
And apparently, the surgeon Treves, who took him in, he was the one who did the autopsy and like broke his flesh down for the skeleton as well, which I think is really weird because they were friends. Although, I don't know. I mean, you know, if I had the ability, I wouldn't want anybody else to dissolve my flesh and preserve my skeleton than my best friend. So,
I don't know if that title falls onto me or anything, but okay.
I'd want if I had those abilities to like prepare somebody for burial, or if they wanted their skeleton preserved, if I could do it, I wouldn't let anybody else do it. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, like your confidant, your trusted ally.
Yeah, your caretaker, kind of.
Brothers / sisters in arms.
Yep.
Even though it's not wartime, but anyway. So, Hannah.
Yes.
You also, we were talking a little bit before this, you said you also did the dramaturgy for VFR's production.
Yes, well, unofficially I did. I sort of started looking things up from the script that I didn't know what they were and making notes, and people would have questions during rehearsal, and they'd say, who the heck is this Gordon at Khartoum we're talking about? And I say, oh, well, he was this general who was in the British Army, and he was there protecting it against these Muslim extremists in Cyan. And they're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, that would make sense given the time period.
Mm-hmm, yeah. And so, or was it Muslim? I don't remember.
Possibly.
Islam? Is Muslim and Islam the same thing? I'm just displaying my ignorance here.
No, it's okay. I think Islam and the Muslim religion are usually coincided.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll look it up later and apologize to who I need to.
Yeah, we both will. We both will.
Okay, yeah. So basically, those kind of things, like questions that people might have in rehearsal that didn't necessarily have to do with acting,
right?
You know, and so I ended up doing that, and then Brandon asked me to just kind of take charge of those kind of questions and to basically know kind of the background of stuff. So I've been reading this book and everything and learning a little bit about his life. And of course, a lot of creative license is taken in the play. There's this thing where they say that his mother left him at a workhouse at the age of 3, but what happened in historically is that I think she died of pneumonia or something when he was 10, and then he lived with his dad remarried, and he lived with them for a while, and his dad tried to get him to be a street salesman, selling like linens and stuff. But when he was going around trying to sell to people, he'd have this huge crowd following him, and then when he knocked on the door, people would pretend they weren't home because he looked the way that he did.
Right.
You know. So
yeah, that matches up with what I could find too. So.
Yeah, and he couldn't find work anywhere else, so he ended up going into the workhouse, and
which is where the creative liberty takes place. Okay,
yep.
that makes sense.
Yeah, and then from there he was found by a number of people who sort of their profession was displaying circus sideshow acts.
The freak shows, like the early version of like the Barnum like circus that would be popularized through that.
Yeah, exactly. And So there was all of that, and so eventually what happened was that he went overseas to Belgium with one of his with some of his basically agents or whatever.
Okay.
Manager. Because in London they didn't want those kind of things around anymore. They were just sort of like, it's unseemly and you have to leave. And so
because of like high class society deeming it.
Yeah.
Right.
So people had sort of a fascination with these kind of things, but also there was this sort of rise in trying to be more respectable than just gawping at things, you know. So
right.
So they went to try their luck in Belgium, and that was a bust. And he actually ended up being kind of abandoned and had to pay his own way back to London, I think.
Aye.
Yeah, and that was kind of around that time he was sort of discovered by, I think one of Dr. Frederick Treves had a friend named Reginald Tuckett, who first saw a Joseph Merrick in on display and told him, there's this man with this unimaginable disease, and you should go and see him. And so he went and saw him and sort of took him to the Pathological Society for like a lecture about it, you know, and said, look at this. Isn't it interesting? And that's kind of what the scene in the play is based on, where he's standing there, and as he describes, like, his head was enormous, and his right arm was useless, and his legs were all dropsical looking, and he had a hip disease and stuff. And the actor will usually sort of assume the shapes or the posture.
Yep.
And all that. That's sort of based off of the lecture that he gave at the Pathological Society.
Okay.
And it wasn't until a while after that he was actually taken in to live at the hospital.
Wasn't it so like they could study him or things like that, or was it just offered? I think it started out with study, but then they couldn't figure out what was going on with him, really. Like, we still don't really know to this day what because
it was. Some people say that maybe it was some sort of Proteus syndrome.
Well, didn't they try to analyze it again, like in the early 2000s, but like the results were inconclusive?
Yeah. So
that's what I heard. Because it's his entire like condition has become a mystery almost.
Yeah. So yeah. That's kind of the closest they can get. It's not exact, but Proteus syndrome is, have it here on the U.S. National Library of Medicine. It's a rare condition.
Ooh, that coffee's coming to get you.
A rare condition of which I die. Okay.
Oh, no.
Proteus syndrome is a rare condition characterized by overgrowth of the bones, skin, and other tissues. Organs and tissues affected by the disease grow out of proportion to the rest of the body. The overgrowth is usually asymmetrical, which means it affects the right and left sides of the body differently. Proteus syndrome. Newborns with Proteus syndrome have few or no signs of the condition. Overgrowth becomes apparent between the ages of 6 and 18 months and gets more severe with age. So, I mean, that all kind of fits. It's the closest sort of diagnosis that we can get to.
Yeah,
because basically he was born basically normal looking, and then the first thing that started to grow was this mass of bone in his mouth.
Yep.
It started to sort of grow outward from his like top jaw, I think.
Yeah,
and it got to be really long, like 6 or 8 inches. It made it difficult for him to eat and chew. So finally, he went to the doctors at the workhouse, and they actually like put him under and removed part of it.
Oof.
Because it was just sticking out from his face, and he couldn't eat. Which is probably part of the reason why he started to be called the Elephant Man, was because of that.
Yeah.
It's sort of thing, like a massive bone sticking out, like Pinocchio.
Yeah,
in his mouth,
that sounds about right.
Yeah,
and like just hearing that description and like I'm looking at a picture of him like right now.
Yeah,
like you can tell like his right arm is like, especially on the fingers.
Yeah,
they're more massive than the left side.
It was basically not usable. It basically just hung at his side all the time, and the fingers were swollen and.
They look similar in context to like jumbo dill pickles.
Yeah.
From what I can see
in the play, when Treves is describing him to the Pathological Society, he says that the thumb was like a radish.
Oh.
All this stuff, but his left hand was completely normal.
Yeah, his left hand and arm look completely functional, but
yeah, and the rest of him, like his legs are all swollen and bent, and he had a hip disease that sort of there's a picture in here too of like his skeleton, his hip joint is severely atrophied.
Oh my god!
So he couldn't walk. He could only walk with a cane, like because his feet didn't work and his hip was.
Oh, I can only imagine.
Yeah,
I can only imagine what the feet must have looked like.
Yeah. So you don't have to imagine. There's the pictures.
Oh Jesus!
Yep. Yeah, and So when these mobs of people were following him, and some of them were actually quite like abusive and violent, he couldn't get away fast enough because he was just limping along with his cane. To get him to the London hospital, Treves actually sent a cab for him, and he had to wear sort of like he wore this big cloak, and he would wear sort of like what's called a pillar box hat on his head, where it was just a hat and it had sort of like a bag attached to it that would go over his face with some eyeballs. Right. And even that just attracted attention because it's this guy limping around with this bag with eye holes cut in it over his face. So it can't have been easy to go anywhere when even your disguise draws attention. You know. Yeah,
I actually that entire mention of the bag over his head just reminded me of, because I haven't seen the play.
Okay.
I haven't seen the play of Elephant Man. I have seen the movie once or twice.
Right, the 1980s one.
The 1981 with John Hurt as the Elephant Man in question. Who may I say, God bless John Hurt. He does a phenomenal job in this.
Oh yeah.
And like with the mask and everything like that, and the mob following him, it was that moment when he said, "I am not an elephant. I'm not an animal. I am a human being."
That was one of the clips that was available on YouTube that I watched this morning.
It's probably the most famous clip from that film, and probably one of the most.
Yeah.
I don't know if that quote is even in the play. So
no, it's not.
It is not. Okay, I kind of figured. It was only for a movie, but like, yeah, like. But then again, just from like the research I've done, I don't know if that was actually what happened to him, like when they were transporting him to the hospital, or they probably dramatized that up a lot for the movie.
Yeah, probably.
But still, it's just like,
man,
what
else about him? Yeah, he had kind of like on his sort of like his back and his side, he had this overgrown skin that kind of hung, like, do you see like that sort of stuff?
Let me go.
And it just sort of hung there, and there's this there's this whole couple of scenes in the play where he's just in a bathtub because he had to soak to be rid of this odor that had started to follow him around, like partially because of these growths had some kind of odor, but also because if you look at the picture, and it's probably pretty difficult to neatly go to the bathroom that.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Like,
Yeah.
even taking into account, like, the hip infection and everything like that,
Yeah.
just, his entire body structure is just so awkward.
It's a whole ordeal, and like I work as a caregiver, and I've assisted like senior citizens who are like crippled in some way or other.
Yeah, and they're not able to.
There was this woman who she was in a wheelchair and her feet didn't work very well, and she had a stroke, so one of her arms was completely useless, and having to help her get onto the toilet and everything, like that's not something you can do yourself.
Yeah,
right?
Jeez.
Yeah, you need help, which is one of my favorite sort of messages of this play, is that everybody needs help.
Yeah.
Like, you kind of see that from the very beginning, you kind of can tell that, like, Merrick needs somebody to give him a chance and take care of him and help him to really become all that he can be, because normal society won't let him, you know?
Yeah.
And then as you go on, you kind of start to learn that Treves, who was taking care of him and helping him, that Treves needs help too, even though he's a respected doctor who looks after kings, and he's a prominent Englishman in England, you know, and he's knighted and everything. He still needs help, even though he looks to be very successful on the outside.
Exactly, like behind the scenes,
Mm-hmm.
especially for all of us today, like we always have to put up like the mask of like
Yeah.
how we're doing is like okay and everything like that,
Mm-hmm.
but like behind the scenes, like it can be a very, very different story.
It's a mess, yo.
It is. Life sucks sometimes.
Yeah. And one final thing about his appearance and just the difficulties he had to deal with is his head. His head has a big, like his skull has grown out into these sort of, they describe it as being sort of like cauliflower-like growth.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
saw that in the pictures that I found too, and I was.
Yeah. If you look at his skull from after his death, there's this giant mass of bone on the right side of his head, and his head was enormous. It was about the width of a man's waist.
Oh,
Basically, that's and.
That's a lot of pressure to carry around.
Yes, and his head was so heavy that he couldn't sleep lying down because he wouldn't be able to breathe, and so he actually had to sit like this. Like he would sleep in a chair with his well, I guess he didn't use his left hand because it was stuck, but he would, or his right. And he would sleep kind of like this, with his head, with his knees up and his head on his arm.
To give you guys a little bit of perspective, since you can't see, right now Hannah is seated kind of like how L sits in Death. That's the best way I can describe
Yeah,
this.
it's the L sit. Yeah,
like the L sit in Death Note, with her head face down on her left arm, with the right arm hanging down by the side.
I mean, it would be horrible to sleep like this. Like I'm not too uncomfortable, but I couldn't sleep like this. But he had to sleep sitting up because his head was too heavy for him to lie down.
Well, I'm assuming he was in a more comfortable like chair, but at the same time, that is an awkward sleeping position.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I've been in several awkward sleeping positions where I've had to sleep in like chairs and everything like that, like traveling on trains and everything.
If you've ever slept, on a train, but he had to do that every night, and it was like, and what actually,
it's a nightmare.
Yeah, so he came to the London hospital when he was 21 years old, and that was in, I want to say 1886. No, 1884.
Okay.
was when he came to the hospital, I think, and he lived there for 6 years. And he was only 27 when he passed away. And what actually happened was, I think he was sleeping, sitting on the bed, and I think maybe what happened was he unbalanced and he fell over, and he was lying down. And at first they thought that it was asphyxiation, and
right.
That's how it's portrayed in the play, and that's what, in the play, what Treves says happens to him, that it was asphyxiation, the weight of his head crushed the windpipe.
Right.
But in the official autopsy, they discovered that what actually happened was that the weight of his head, it actually snapped his neck.
God.
So,
that's insane.
Yeah. So then, he couldn't get up, basically, because his neck was snapped. And he couldn't breathe as well because his head was so heavy. So that makes sense. I'm looking at his skeleton right now, especially with it's as you said, the skull is like all cauliflowered. Yeah, and his left hip is kind of, the skeleton of his legs looks pretty normal.
Yeah, all things considered.
Yeah, I mean that part is a little bit enlarged, but he probably, the right side of his body, I think, was a lot worse than the left side. Like, everything seemed to be concentrated. Like, the big lump is on the right side. His right arm is unusable.
Yeah, and wasn't, the hip problem on the right side as well?
No. Like, the hip problem was on his left side, unfortunately.
Oh, okay.
So, he had all the, osseous growths and things on the right side of his body, but then his left hip also was messed up.
Oh yeah, I can see it from the skeleton.
Yeah. It's kind of,
you can kind of see it in both the hip and the spine.
Yeah, and so in the movie, the 1980s movie, they did all the prosthetics and stuff, but in plays typically there's no prosthesis used at all, and it's just an actor, and the actor. Like what our actor is doing, I'm just going to stand up and show you. What our actor is doing is he has a cane in his left hand.
Okay.
And he sort of turns his head a little bit, and he kind of puts his mouth off sideways a little bit. Okay.
Hannah has her head turned towards her right shoulder.
Yeah, he does it like that, and then he has just the arm hanging down, and then he kind of pigeon toes a little bit, and walks around. So
wow.
Basically, what happens is. In that scene at the Pathological Society, when Treves is describing what he looks like, you've got the guy standing there. This is typically how they do it. You've got the guy standing there, just neutral. And then as Treves describes what's going on, he says the face was deformed and stuff, and the actor will sort of turn their head and do that. And they said the right arm was unusable, and they'd sort of hold it and put it into position. And when they say the fingers were tuberous roots or a radish, he'll kind of this and demonstrate the limping walk and everything. So it's all just the actor portraying stuff, no prosthesis or anything.
All right, that's great. I was wondering how that portrays, but
and that leaves it up to the audience imagination a lot, which is a lot of what theater does. In that medium, you can suspend your disbelief,
which honestly works towards its advantages, especially in a show especially for a show like this where it's just there's no theater company in the world that has enough money to do a prosthesis like that.
No.
There is no kind of budget, there is no kind of time frame, there is no kind of thing. So you have to work work it. I mean, as Henry V says, piece together our imperfections with your thoughts.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what you have to suspend your disbelief.
Speak of horses, imagine that you see them.
Exactly. When you have to audience, when you're seeing a show, and you have to use your imagination. You have to suspend your disbelief. You have to suck yourself into that world. And just from just how you just basically described some of this, I'm really excited to watch this.
It's gonna be good. We have a good group of people. We've been working on dialects. So everyone in the show uses RP, and some of them use Cockney as well. I'm not as good at Cockney, but I try.
Well, you're doing a little bit good with the Cockney right there.
Right. It's all right.
Yeah, it's all right.
Yeah.
All right. It's been a while since I've done Cockney as well. So for those not familiar with dialects and you've heard dialects, but those not familiar with like the proper terminology for dialects. Generally, there's about 2 or 3 different dialects for British English like dialects. You have your RP, which is for higher class society, for those that are high class nobles.
Exactly. If you're a gentleman and a doctor.
Yes, very posh.
Yes.
Very posh is the way I can describe that accent. While Cockney, I can't do Cockney very well, so go right ahead.
Cockney is for your more lower class kind of guy, you know. You put me on the spot there.
No, that's okay.
It's all right. Yeah, in the Cockney, they sort of like them that's working in the DOS house, you know.
If you want a good example of like modernized Cockney, think Michael Caine.
Michael Caine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alfred from the Dark Knight trilogy.
Right.
So he's got a bit of
Master Wayne.
Yeah, he's got more of a Cockneyed dialect compared to other ones.
Or Morris Moss from the IT crowd.
I would consider his more Cockney.
Fire! Exclamation point.
Fire! Exclamation point.
Yeah.
Looking forward to hearing from you.
Yeah.
Oh, we're gonna talk about that show one of these days.
Oh gosh, I love it.
Like just talk about British comedies. I will do an episode on that.
Oh, little correction here. I was looking up something else, and it says here, although the official cause of Joseph Merrick's death was asphyxia, Treves, who performed the autopsy, said Merrick had died of a dislocated neck. So it didn't snap his neck; it dislocated it. Which, if you've ever dislocated anything, it becomes pretty useless. You can't move it very much.
Right.
God, what was I looking up? Gosh. I don't know. Gosh, I guess it wasn't important.
It's all right. You provided plenty with that. But yeah, like it's really this is probably like one of the most fascinating stories about a human being, like just based on his appearance alone.
Yeah, this story is really close to my heart.
And not only that, but like in the terms of like the medical field, just from what I've observed, like his entire condition, everything has like stumped like medical experts for close to over a century now. Yeah,
over a century.
So yeah, like because I said before, and I re-looked it up while just a few seconds ago. We still don't know. Like we have an idea about what the condition was, but the results are still inconclusive as of 2003. I want to say. Yeah. It might have changed recently. I don't know, but we've never heard of it. We haven't heard of it yet.
Yeah. No.
Especially for this show, since Hannah, you were working on it, I'm pretty sure you would have found something if like it was discovered. Yeah.
It's a mystery. It really is. Yes. So the show opens on March 5th and runs through March 15th at the Underground Collaborative. Tickets are on sale now, actually.
Yep.
And do you want to see some of the promo artwork that I did?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, yeah, even though this is terrible for a podcast.
No,
but this is a sketch that I did just for Alexis to use for like social.
Oh my God! Things. Please share that on the General Geekery social media.
Okay, sure, I will. And
that looks so good.
I will. And then this is what we're going to be. This is what we're going to be kind of. I think, selling at the show and at fundraisers just to kind of support our art and everything. I try to make a piece of artwork for every show that we do. So I have to just explain what this is about, basically. Is there's a line in the show where he talks about how he says he thinks his head is so heavy or so big because it's so full of dreams. Okay?
That's so touching.
I know, yeah. And the last...
I want to cry!
Yeah. He says, I think my head is so big because it's so full of dreams. And So that sort of made me want to draw basically that picture that I showed you just now that I did, except he's got a little universe in his head.
Oh my god!
I love it. It was so simple, and
I want to cry.
Yeah, and that's one of my.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite parts of the thing too. Is like this, because sometimes you have an ability for something, like an ability to have dreams or something, and sometimes these things can be a burden, you know. And for him, it sort of seemed to him that it was also a physical burden, you know, like people with anxiety or something are a lot more aware of their surroundings. They're a lot more aware of other people.
Right.
Like it's kind of a curse in some ways, but it can also be a blessing. It can also help you to understand people. And like sometimes I think to myself, just like with everything that's hard and wrong, or like hard for me or wrong with me or whatever it may be. I may not be like physically deformed or anything, but
right.
These things, I am the way that I am for a reason. And honestly, for all the bad stuff, the good that I'm able to do because I can understand people is, I wouldn't trade it. So
I'm actually shedding a few tears, guys. Like, God, Hannah, how? Wow.
You're welcome.
You're making me feel so many things.
I'm so sorry.
No, you're good. You're good.
Yep, that's what I do. I make people feel the things.
Oh, it's good. It's good to have that out though.
Yep.
But yeah, guys, if you're strolling through Milwaukee, Wisconsin, in between March 5th to March 15th, please go check out Voices Found Repertory's production of The Elephant Man. Again, the dates are March 5th to March 15th. You can check them out at the Underground Collaborative at 161 West Wisconsin Avenue.
Yep. Tickets are on sale at voicesfoundrep.com.
And March 5th, I think, is the premiere of the Pay What You Can night.
It depends. What is March 5th a Friday?
I think it's a Thursday.
Oh, well, yeah, that would be the Pay What You Can then.
Yeah, so the first night is open. March 5th is Pay What You Can. So you can go in at the door, pay as much as you can in order to see the show. Absolutely go do it. Support, if you're in the Milwaukee area, support local theater. I highly recommend these guys. Voices Found does amazing work, and I can't wait to see it. I'm going to do my best to try to go opening night.
All right. Well, I've said all I wanted to say.
All right. Thanks for sharing all that with us.
I stabbed you in the heart. I'm done now.
My heart. You're tugging at my heartstrings. So, all right, guys. This has been episode 16 of the General Geekery Podcast, where we have talked about The Elephant Man. Thank you so much again for listening in on Spotify, Spreaker, wherever you guys listen to your podcasts. You can check out the General Geekery Podcast on social media at Gen Geek Podcast on Facebook and Twitter, and at General Geekery on Instagram. Hannah, where can they check you out at? You can check me out rolling dice with my party on Mondays at 7:30 at twitch.tv/loadeddiceadventures. Again, that's Mondays at 7:30. And you can also find me on Instagram at Pythian Legume. And you guys can check me out at Twitter, Instagram, as well as on twitch.tv at RyuzakiMK7. Again, this has been episode 16 of the General Geekery Podcast. For Hannah Kubiak, I'm Donald Kaczynski. And Joseph Merrick, you have... Well, not Joseph. Why am I saying Joseph Merrick? That's not his name. That is his name. His name is Joseph. It was Joseph? Okay. Yeah. I got it right. Thank God. Yep. So in the play, it's John. There's some confusion about it. Oh, yeah. That's weird. Okay. Yeah. But, well, I guess for respect for the name and everything like that. But but Joseph Merrick, you our fascination with you still goes strong. You have inspired a lot in the medical field for us to geek over. So thank you again for living the life the way you lived. I hope you're resting easy in the great beyond. But hopefully, just like the rest of us, always remember to keep your geek on. Always. Clink, clink. Clank. Later, guys.